I'm Craig Lamolt. Tonight on Greater Boston, the people of Massachusetts are afraid of political violence in reaction to the 2024 presidential election. Our politics reporter Adam Riley will join me to break down some of the results of a new GBH News and Commonwealth Beacon poll. Then, reflecting on today's total eclipse of the sun. Curiosity Desk host Edgar B. Herwick III joins us from Vermont in the path of the totality. And an MIT researcher joins me to talk the science behind it all. Political tensions are sky high in Massachusetts. And according to a new GBH News and Commonwealth Beacon poll conducted by Mass Inc. polling group, a majority of people in the state are afraid we might see a repeat of the January 6th attack or other violent reactions to the 2024 election. GBH politics reporter Adam Riley joins me now to break down some of the poll results. Hey, Adam.
Hey, Craig.
So the poll looks at both political tension and the likelihood of major violence. Basically, what did it tell us? What did we find out about Massachusetts?
We found out that residents of Massachusetts are really pessimistic about our civic well-being right now. 72% of the people who responded to this poll, 72% of residents, think that political tensions in America right now are either very bad or constitute a crisis. 39% say they're very bad, 33% say that they're a crisis. But again, that's 72% of people saying that things are about as bad as they can get. And then when you ask people if it's likely that the U.S. is going to see major violence in connection with the 2024 presidential election, 64% of people in Massachusetts say that we are. So when you put those two things together, what it says to me is that there's an incredibly high level of anxiety and concern.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on right now, of course. What do you think are the main forces behind what we're seeing in these numbers?
Well, I think January 6th would loom large, right? And we get constant reminders of what happened on January 6th, including from former President Trump on the campaign trail, when he frequently will kick off rallies by playing audio of the so-called January 6th choir. So the way that, I mean, I think, you know, not to get us off on a topic that we could talk about for a half hour, but when you look at the way that event has been processed, it has not been sort of this event around which there was a collective reckoning and we decided, okay, the line was crossed there that we don't want to see crossed in our politics. It's actually being celebrated to an extent by one of the presidential candidates. I think that's, I mean, you can't offer an assessment of what's going on without mentioning that. And the former president's willingness to, for example, disseminate an image of President Biden hogtied that he saw in the back of a pickup truck, warnings of a bloodbath if Biden is reelected. I know that there are people on the right who will hear me making these points and will say, well, what about these things that happen on the left? And it's, you know, as Juliette Kayyem, former Massachusetts Homeland Security advisor, I spoke with her and she said, you can both sides this. You can talk about Antifa on the left, for example, but only one of the presidential candidates is routinely campaigning, suggesting that this stuff is appropriate.
Okay. One of the things the poll did was look at this by demographics. Can you tell us, what did it tell us about how people are feeling across demographic lines?
There are some interesting divides. 76% of white respondents said they thought tensions were either very bad or, forgive me, I think I got that wrong, very bad or constituted a crisis. There we go. Let's try and remember the crisis phrase. You compare that to the number of black respondents who said that tensions are very bad or constitute a crisis, and that's just 49%. So to me, again, 49% is a big number. It's a lot of people thinking that, but there's also a huge gulf between 76 and 49. That one struck me right off the bat.
Yeah.
Probably more than any other one.
Yeah. Also, what about the political violence question and the demographic breakdown there?
In terms of what the level of concern is across different groups. I'm going to refer to my notes again just because it's hard for me to commit all these numbers to memory.
Sure.
69% of Democrats say that major violence is likely in connection with the presidential election. Republicans are less concerned. Their number is 60%. So again, high numbers in both cases, but a noticeable delta between those two groups.
Okay, okay. There was another poll that talked about just how many people feel that political violence might be justified, right?
Yep. And that's actually, if we were to poll these questions again, I would love to learn how our fellow Massachusetts residents feel about this. But in a poll that came out just a couple days ago, PBS NewsHour, NPR, and Marist found that 20% of Americans think political violence might be justified or might be necessary to get the country back on track. And when you look at that number, which is troubling to me in and of itself as someone who does not want to live in a country where people see political violence as necessary, there's a stark difference when you break it down by party. 12% of Democrats feel that way, 18% of independents feel that way, and 28% of Republicans think political violence may be necessary to get us where we need to be.
I think it's important every now and then to take a step back and think about how none of this is normal, right? I mean, it's not like you've done exactly these same questions, I think, in prior presidential elections, but like, this is not normal.
This is a brave world which is aberrant and troubling. And yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that I've got a few years on you, but as you and I were growing up, the idea that there was going to be, I mean, that phrase that we pat ourselves on the back on every election cycle, there's a peaceful transfer of power. Once again, isn't it remarkable? There's a peaceful transfer of power. Well, last time there wasn't, and there may not be this time.
You reached out to the FBI, I know, for a story that you did about these poll numbers. What did they have to say about this?
They did not want to comment on the specific findings in the poll, but they did say that their efforts are already underway to guard against a host of possible malign developments in connection with the 2024 election, including possible violence. And they want people, if they see something that they believe is suspicious or troubling, they want them to report it to law enforcement. So they say they're on it and that they want to hear from us if we are troubled by something we're seeing.
Okay. Also, what do we know about the effect that this kind of fear, especially of political violence, could potentially have on voter turnout?
There seems, from my research of research done by others, to be a couple different directions it could go in. Fear, as far as I can tell from cruising through the research over the last day or two, fear tends to depress turnout, which makes sense. I mean, if you're living in a country where you think you may, for example, be assaulted for going to the polls, you're going to think twice about going to the polls. Anger can drive up turnout. Negative emotions can drive up turnout. So we weren't really asking in this poll about whether people are angry or fearful about these things. So that remains to be seen. I think whatever emotion predominates could determine whether turnout's driven up or not. But if you look back to the last election, I think a lot of people were nervous and maybe angry as well. Turnout was incredibly high. Also, I have been struck over the years by the turnout in the Boston mayoral elections in the late 60s and early 70s. That was a time when the city was incredibly divided over busing, the use of busing to integrate Boston's public schools. And turnout was astronomical. I mean, more than twice what we see now on a regular basis. So sometimes if people are upset about something, it's more likely to get them at the polls. We'll see if that happens in this case.
And I know that this is just part of what the poll was, and there's more to come, essentially.
There's a whole bunch of findings that we are going to be meeting out over the course of several days. I can't remember if you're having other people back to talk about this stuff this week. I think you may be, but yeah, everything from how people feel about the situation in Gaza to State Auditor Diana DiZoglio's push to audit the state legislature to the migrant crisis, a whole bunch of other topics that we're going to be trying to let people know about.
Okay, well, stay tuned for sure. Adam Reilly, thank you so much for coming to talk to us about this.
Good to see you.
We're going to have more on the poll, as we said, tomorrow on GBH News as we continue to share what's been learned from Massachusetts residents. Next up, did you catch it? Parts of northern New England just witnessed a total solar eclipse. The rare astronomical event drew massive crowds across its path of totality, where millions of people traveled to witness the sight in its full glory. That includes our own Edgar B. Herwick III, host of GBH's Curiosity Desk and co-host of The Culture Show, who joins us now from Vermont. Hey, Edgar.
Hey, Craig, how are you?
I'm great. I want to hear how you are. First, I should note that we are taping this shortly after the full totality. Just what was it like? Tell me what it was like.
I mean, it was a festival scene here in St. Johnsbury. It still kind of is. I don't know if you can see behind me, but there are easily thousands of people still here in this small town, which is only a town of 6,000 people. They had their main street blocked off, and it really did feel like an all-day party. There were vendors up and down the sides of the road, food trucks, people from all walks of life, all ages. A lot of families, a lot of school groups, just thousands of people gathered here to witness, you know, as everybody has said, a once in a lifetime celestial event, which, by the way, is still going on here. If I safely look up at the sun, there is still a little bite of the moon is taking a little bite out of the tippy top of the sun right now. So there are some folks who have definitely hung around for the whole thing.
I love it. I love it. A lot of us here at the GBH studios went up to the roof and looked at it up there. But Boston, of course, not in the path of the totality. Yeah. So it was very, very cool. But it was not what you experienced. Describe what it was like to see the full eclipse, the totality. What was that experience like?
Craig, I've talked to a lot of people who had, prior to this, been in a spot where they saw a full solar eclipse. And the thing that everybody said to me, to a person almost, is it's undescribable. Now, having experienced, I am going to be one of those people that says it's indescribable. Like, it's really hard to explain. I will say
that's totally unsatisfying.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are a few things about it. One, when you can take your glasses off and safely view it, which is one of the things that you can do, and you just see this black hole in the middle of the sun, it is a little scary. It is a little exhilarating. And surprisingly, and I know I had this reaction in talking with folks here, a lot of people did too, incredibly emotional. And it's hard to explain why, but there were a lot of people tearing up. There were a lot of people hugging their loved one and just like kind of crying together. It's oddly a really emotional experience. And I can't even explain why.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to ask you anyway, because I've heard this described as like a spiritual experience, and even for people who aren't usually spiritual in nature, do you feel changed in some way?
I don't know if I feel changed. I will say one of the things that you heard a lot is people immediately being like, well, I'm going to be an eclipse chaser now. And that I get. It is a little bit like, having tasted it for just a few minutes, as the sun started coming back, I felt to myself, I don't want this to end. I don't want the sun to come back yet. I want to sit in this strange, dark moment for a moment longer. And so that feeling of like, I want to experience this again, I'm having it too. I don't know if it's spiritual. I don't know if I'm changed. It's undeniably special. There is something about it that is clearly special. It is viscerally interesting, and you want to experience it again. I am already like, okay, looking at the map, maybe I'll go to Spain in a couple years. Maybe I get to Australia in a couple years. Like, it's something.
And I note that we will be able to do this in Boston, but not until 2079.
2079. So if I start taking my vitamins now, maybe I can hang in that long, but I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, I was talking to some of our younger colleagues today, and I was like, you guys actually might see this, but I'm not sure I'm going to join you for it, unfortunately. You've been talking to a lot of the people there about their experiences. Let's just hear from a few of them right now.
With the sun covered now?
Yes.
I can't wait, for this last little sliver to go.
What do you think?
It's very cool. I didn't know what to expect, but it's very cool.
It's something that we'll never see again, and never did see before.
It's like a crescent moon now. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, crescent sun.
Crescent sun, right?
Cool. One small speck in the universe. That's what we are.
What have you been hearing from folks? What are they telling you about this experience? Any stories of families together to watch this, or what's it like for the people who have traveled to be here?
It's a lot of people saying, like, this was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I've never seen this before. I know I'm not going to be around to see it again, and we need to get there and do it. I mean, that is almost what everybody had to say. A lot of families, a lot of parents who brought their kids and said, I wanted my kid to experience this. This is something special for them to experience. And a lot of school groups as well. Teachers who were able to work with parents to get entire classrooms up here saying, this is the year that we're talking about things like the sun and the moon. And we thought, we've got to get here. So, I mean, and we're talking about groups from as far away as Rhode Island even. I talked to a school group from Rhode Island who traveled all the way up here, and there were probably 20 of them. So, people just really wanted to be here for something that they hadn't experienced. And I think we're just giddy with anticipation as it got close. And it certainly didn't disappoint. The crowd, when the moon finally covered the sun, there was just an eruption of applause. And it sustained for a few minutes. And then after totality ended and everybody had to kind of put their glasses back on, the church, which is right here in the square, rang their bell a couple of times. And it was just magical.
It does seem like this is a community that's embraced this role and has welcomed people. I know you've been talking to folks about some of the small business aspects of this, and a community deciding to really welcome the world to their. What are you hearing from those in the town about having all of these folks there?
Well, this is a town that has made a decision, and they've been working at this for decades, that they're going to work together as a town and reimagine themselves as a cultural hub. Now, this is, as I said, a small city, 6,000 people live here, but they punch above their weight in the cultural sphere. They have a science museum with a planetarium. They have an Athenaeum, this beautiful library with a gallery that had been built in the mid-1800s.
And remind us the name of the town that you're in right now.
This is St. Johnsbury, Vermont.
St. Johnsbury,
Vermont, yeah. And so they've been working together, and they've decided that they saw that they were in the path of totality, and they said, look, we're an organization that's loading into bringing people into our town. We have things for them here. There's an arts organization here, Catamount Arts, that's been trying to put on bigger and bigger events. And they said, all right, there's people coming. Let's double down and let's invite them here. And so they got together. They worked together. They got a plan. They had a parking plan in place. And talking to everybody from the folks of these cultural institutions today, all the way to the police and the fire department, everybody feels like the work that they've been putting in paid off, because a lot of people came. People are saying somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 people came to the town. That was the upper end of their estimation, and it's gone off without a hitch. So all of that planning has paid off.
And I heard you say that there was some gridlock this morning, right? It was a tough situation getting into town.
Yeah, the folks in the town made it clear, especially the police. They said, now, we're in charge of the town. Once you get out into those highways, they're like, that's state police. That's something we can't really control. And it sounds like, yeah, there was quite a bit of traffic. But once you got into town here off the highways, it sounds like they had enough parking. They had shuttle buses that were bringing people into town. Now, who knows what it looks like outside of this town as people are trying to leave. But reports were that it was pretty gridlocked on the highways early this morning.
All right. Well, it sounds like traveling to see a total eclipse of the sun is something that you would recommend, and maybe this isn't your last time.
Yeah, I got to be honest. Highly recommend it. If you can get into the path of totality, I would say do it.
All right. At the very least, why don't we make a plan to meet up in 2079 and watch it together then?
If you could do the express. Sounds good.
All right. Edgar B. Herwick III, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Craig.
The eclipse is not just fascinating to watch, it's also a unique opportunity for research that has drawn scientists from around the world, including Larissa Goncharenko from MIT's Haystack Observatory, who's part of a team studying what happens in the upper atmosphere during solar eclipses. Thank you so much for joining us.
This is my pleasure.
So what is the impact of an eclipse on the upper atmosphere, and what are you trying to learn?
There are a lot of differences in impact of eclipse on the upper atmosphere compared to on the ground that most people experience. We study upper atmosphere from about 70 kilometers to and up to maybe about 1,000 kilometers in altitude. And upper atmosphere over there is very thin in density. And big part of it is what's called ionosphere, plasma portion. And plasma portion of our upper atmosphere, ionosphere, is created by solar ultraviolet radiation. Immediate thing that happens during solar eclipse, when we turn sun off, we turn radiation off. And electron density sharply decreases. But in addition to that, it's not just decrease in density, there is also decrease in temperatures, just like what people experience on the ground who are watching eclipse. And this decrease in temperature can be really quite high. There are also variations because of changes in pressure. There are also variations in wind system. And we try to observe all these parameters so that we understand how upper atmosphere varies, how it responds to the eclipse, and after that, how it recovers. And we have this when moon shadow passes over the continental United States, we have this decrease in electron density that trails the eclipse itself, like in this moon shadow, and it can be really quite large. So we have some experience from previous eclipses. We're really looking forward to see what happens during this eclipse, and we put on all kinds of instrumentation that we have. Some of them well-tested, really well-known ground-based observations. Some of them absolutely new that our brilliant engineers designed and constructed really just in time for the eclipse.
So are there practical implications to better understanding what's going on in the upper atmosphere, or is it really just more about better understanding our world?
Oh, absolutely. There are really important practical applications. In particular, ionosphere is very important for HF, radio signal propagation, and that makes it important for aviation, for navigation, for precise positioning. So this is one aspect. But in general, understanding what happens in the upper atmosphere really helps us to understand near Earth space and how we can use it and use in a sustainable way for our modern technology, for our modern world, so we can provide real scientific foundation for sustainable use of near Earth space. And so this is our larger goal.
This is the range of space that the International Space Station is in, right?
Absolutely, right in the middle of that, and we can, with our observations, with our techniques, we can see even at higher altitudes. But it really covers a range of altitudes where we have low Earth orbiting satellites.
And this is the first time, I think, that you're using 4 different methods to try to capture this data, right? How did it go? Do you know yet how successful today's research and data collection was?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We have real-time data links, and we keep watching. We keep watching all this in real time. So one of the systems is we have a very large radar that uses 2 antennas, one of them 220 feet in diameter. And another antenna is, this antenna looks way vertically up, and we have another antenna 150 feet in diameter, and that one is steerable, so it can move. And with this antenna, when we move it, we actually see, we can observe what happens in the near Earth space all the way down to Rocky Mountains, all the way down to Florida. And this is what we did for this eclipse. We combined vertical-looking antenna with the steerable antenna, so we can actually see large portion of continental United States and what happens in during the eclipse, and how perturbations, how upper atmosphere recovers from this perturbation.
And isn't there a citizen science element to this, where you have antennas around the country, right?
We have citizen science aspect in somewhat different ways. We have so the technique that I just told you, it's just one technique, but we have 4 of them. And we use combination because each technique gives us a very different type of observation. And we use combination of all 4 to obtain most comprehensive information. And for like another technique where we really use citizen scientists are GNSS receivers. We have receivers, like completely new receivers with very high resolution. We put them in a path of totality, and some of them in backyards, some of them at institutions. They are used to train students at this point with real-time data links. So this is one element, but there is another element where we have completely new HF radar systems that use very low power transmitters and very small antennas. This is new technology. We used to have this type of radar where antenna would be the size of a football field. And now our brilliant engineers develop system where antenna is maybe the size of the refrigerator. And we field them in different areas, including this is one of the elements of citizen science. We can put it in the backyard. I have one right now in my own backyard.
You do. That's
and
great.
Collecting data on all these paths between different transmitters and different receivers, and that gives us multiple paths linked between each receiver and each transmitter, and that provides unique imaging of what happens in the ionosphere. This is something that we never had before.
So what was the experience like for you today? I mean, you're collecting all of this data, you're hard at work making sure that everything goes right. Was there any time for the awe of the experience of a total eclipse?
Absolutely. We try to make time for that as well, in between checking on our data links and looking if everything, all instrument worked correctly. But absolutely, we had a party in the observatory with eclipse watching party. With of course, when people went outside and looked at our close to totality obscuration. We had close to 95%, 94%, which is really still really quite high.
That's great. What is it about eclipses that captures our imagination like this?
This is absolutely unique type of experience. In our science, it's really difficult to come to conclusion what exactly caused some perturbation, and near space is really highly variable. And in this kind of experiment, so this is very special case for us when we know for sure when exactly solar EUV turned off. This is controlled type of experiment. We do not have many opportunities like this. Next one will be 20 years from now.
Well, Larissa Goncharenko, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
That's it for tonight. But come back tomorrow. We'll dig into how Massachusetts residents are feeling about the war in Gaza and how they want the U.S. to respond. That's with more results from the new GBH News Commonwealth Beacon poll. Plus, how the war is affecting who a pair of Democrats plan to vote for in November. And scenes from the Red Sox first home game of the season. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching. Good night.